Vin Diesel had always been a man in the spotlight. His life was full of cameras, interviews, movie sets, and fans who followed his every move. But on this particular evening, he wanted none of that. He wanted a break, a night where he could feel normal and be like anyone else. So he decided to step out, not in a limousine or with a team of assistants, but quietly, almost anonymously, to one of his own restaurants. He had owned the place for a while, but he rarely visited without drawing attention. This time, he wanted to see it as any ordinary customer would. Dressed casually in jeans, a simple t-shirt, a baseball cap pulled low, and sunglasses even though it was evening, Vin made his way to the restaurant. He parked a few streets away, hoping no one would recognize him on the short walk. The streets were busy, filled with the usual chatter of people finishing work, traffic moving slowly, and the occasional distant siren. He could feel the tension of his usual life lift slightly with each step. This was what he wanted, a night of quiet observation, a chance to see his restaurant without cameras, reporters, or fans interrupting everything. As he approached the entrance, he noticed the familiar buzz of activity inside. The restaurant was alive with energy. Servers moved quickly, balancing plates and drinks while the host greeted people warmly as they entered. There was laughter from some tables, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional call of a chef from the kitchen. Vin paused for a moment outside, taking it all in. It felt good to witness it like an outsider, to see the place functioning naturally, full of life. He pushed the door open carefully and stepped inside. The warm air and the mix of smells, freshly baked bread, sizzling meat, and the faint scent of herbs hit him immediately. He felt a small smile tug at his lips. Despite the busy evening rush, everything felt in order, almost like a well-choreographed dance. He walked slowly, pretending to be just another guest, observing the flow of staff and the way they interacted with customers. Every detail mattered to him. He had spent a lot of time thinking about the design, the menu, and the atmosphere, but seeing it in real life, especially without anyone knowing he was there, gave him a different kind of satisfaction. He reached the hostess desk and was greeted with a friendly, professional smile. "Good evening, table for one?" she asked. Vin nodded, keeping his voice low and casual. "Yes, just one, please." "Right this way," she said, leading him to a small table near the corner, close enough to observe the rest of the restaurant but still feeling private. As he settled into his chair, he glanced around. He noticed the young servers moving quickly, balancing trays with skill and care. They smiled at some customers, exchanged quick words with colleagues, and occasionally laughed at some private joke. The kitchen doors opened and closed continuously, and the sound of sizzling pans and chopping knives created a rhythm that matched the energy of the restaurant. Vin picked up the menu, pretending to read, but his attention was divided. He wasn't just thinking about what he wanted to eat. He was observing the way everything worked, the small interactions between staff and customers, the way a server noticed a spill before it became a problem, the way the manager moved quietly behind the scenes making sure everything stayed smooth. It was fascinating to him how much effort went into keeping a restaurant running so perfectly, and he felt a deep appreciation for every person involved. He watched a young server greet a table nearby. She smiled politely, took their order, and moved on with a tray full of dishes. Vin noticed her hands shook slightly as she carried the plates, but she didn't let it show to the customers. He admired her composure. He knew firsthand how tiring it could be to maintain a professional facade when you were exhausted or stressed. He sipped water and continued observing, enjoying the anonymity that allowed him to witness the restaurant in a way no celebrity could usually experience. As the evening went on, more customers arrived. Families, couples, friends celebrating small moments, everyone bringing their own energy into the space. Vin felt a strange satisfaction in watching the restaurant serve these people, providing not just food but a welcoming environment. He knew it wasn't just about the dishes on the menu. It was about the experience, the comfort, the little details that made people want to return, and from where he was sitting, he could see that everything was running smoothly. He noticed some servers exchanging quick encouragements, a pat on the back here, a reassuring smile there. There was a sense of teamwork that he appreciated deeply. He knew he had invested in creating a positive environment, but seeing it in action, without the pressure of publicity or media attention, felt validating. He could see the dedication in the staff, the pride in the work they did, and it made him feel connected to something bigger than just himself. While Vin was focused on the overall scene, he suddenly noticed a subtle movement near the corner of the restaurant. It wasn't something a casual observer would immediately catch, but his trained attention picked it up. He turned slightly, trying to see without being obvious, and noticed a young server sitting alone behind some stacked boxes, her head down. At first he thought she might be taking a brief break, but then he noticed the small movements of her shoulders, the quiet trembling that indicated something more. She was crying softly. Vin froze for a moment. He had expected many things when he came in, but this was not one of them. The restaurant was busy, lively, full of energy and controlled chaos. And yet here was a person struggling quietly in a corner, away from the eyes of customers and most colleagues. He felt a sudden wave of concern and empathy. This was a human moment, raw and unguarded, and he didn't want to intrude, yet he couldn't just ignore it. He set down his water glass and watched from a distance, trying to assess the situation. She was young, probably in her early 20s, wearing the standard server uniform. She had been moving quickly before, balancing trays and plates with skill, but now she sat alone, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. It struck Vin how invisible she had become in her moment of struggle, hidden in the corner while the restaurant continued to hum around her. He felt a pang of guilt, realizing that sometimes the demands of work and life could overwhelm people in ways others never noticed. Vin considered whether he should approach her immediately or wait. He decided to observe a little longer, giving her space but also making sure she was safe. He thought about how often people put on a brave face, how they continued with their responsibilities despite personal struggles. He had seen it in his own life and the people around him, and now he was seeing it here, in someone whose hard work kept a restaurant running smoothly for everyone else. As he watched, he noticed subtle signs of exhaustion, her shoulders sagging, her movement slow, the occasional deep sigh. Vin felt a deep respect for her strength, for the effort it took to keep going despite feeling overwhelmed. He thought about all the unseen moments like this in life, the small battles people fought quietly while the world continued around them. He felt grateful for the chance to witness it and, at the same time, concerned about how he could help. The restaurant continued to buzz with energy, oblivious to the quiet moment in the corner. Vin sipped his water again, taking in the atmosphere, but his mind kept returning to the young server. He thought about the importance of empathy, of noticing the people around you, of understanding that everyone had challenges, even if they weren't visible at first glance. He felt a sense of responsibility, a desire to make a difference even in a small way. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was why he had come, not just to enjoy a quiet evening, but to connect even indirectly with the reality of his restaurant and the people who made it what it was. He realized that his presence, even as an unseen observer, could have an impact, and he knew that if he handled it carefully, he could help without embarrassing or alarming the young server. For now, he continued to watch, letting the scene unfold naturally. The young server remained seated, quietly crying, unaware of the silent observer nearby. Vin felt a mix of emotions: concern, empathy, admiration, and a growing desire to act. He knew that this moment, seemingly small and unnoticed, could be significant for her if approached with care. And he understood that tonight, his visit to the restaurant was no longer just about enjoying a quiet meal. It was about witnessing a human story unfold and being part of it in a meaningful, thoughtful way. As the evening went on, Vin remained at his table, quietly observing the restaurant and the people within it. He felt a connection to everyone working so hard, especially the young server who had allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. He realized that in these ordinary places, in these small moments, the real-life stories happened, the ones that mattered the most. And he knew that his next steps, if taken carefully, could make a lasting difference for someone who deserved to feel seen and supported. Vin Diesel remained at his corner table, watching quietly. The restaurant continued to hum with activity around him, but his attention was fully on the young server who had taken a moment for herself behind the boxes. He could see her shoulders shaking slightly, and every now and then, she dabbed at her eyes with the sleeve of her uniform. It was a quiet scene, but for Vin, it felt as if the whole world had slowed down, focusing only on her. He felt a strange mix of sadness and respect. Here was someone who gave her all to the job, Yet life had clearly placed a heavy weight on her shoulders tonight. He thought about what could have caused her tears. Was it stress from the shift or something personal that had spilled over into her work? It didn't matter much, he realized. What mattered was that she was in pain, even for a brief moment, and she deserved attention and kindness even if she didn't expect it. Vin had always believed that small acts of empathy could mean the difference between someone feeling invisible and someone feeling noticed and supported. He had seen it in his own life when people had reached out in unexpected ways, and he knew he wanted to act, but he needed to do it carefully. He looked around the restaurant. Servers moved swiftly, unaware of her distress. The manager glanced over occasionally, but the pace of the evening kept everyone's attention focused on the diners. Vin's eyes returned to her, watching as she pulled herself together and rose slowly, adjusting her uniform. She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes again, and walked back into the main floor with a tray in her hands, pretending everything was normal. It was a small act of bravery, and Vin felt a rush of admiration for her strength. Vin's mind wandered to the idea of empathy and recognition. He remembered the countless times he had been on sets where people worked tirelessly behind the scenes, unrecognized, unseen, yet they were the backbone of everything. It was easy to overlook those moments, to assume everything was perfect because no one complained. But he knew that reality was far more complex. People carried burdens silently, showing courage in ways that often went unnoticed. And here, in this very restaurant, he had a front row seat to one such moment. He noticed how she moved across the floor, interacting with customers with a polite smile, despite the heavy weight she carried inside. Her performance was seamless, professional, and warm, yet he could see the tension in her hands, the way she occasionally pressed her lips together, a silent effort to hold herself together. Vin felt a sense of awe and respect for her. She wasn't just a server tonight. She was a person demonstrating resilience under pressure, showing a level of professionalism that many would struggle to maintain under similar circumstances. Vin considered whether he should approach her now or wait. He wanted to offer comfort, but he also wanted to do it in a way that respected her privacy. It was delicate. Any sudden interaction might embarrass her or make her feel exposed. He took a deep breath and decided to continue observing, giving her the space she needed while still making sure she was safe. It was a lesson in patience and subtlety, a reminder that sometimes support doesn't need to be immediate to be meaningful. As the minutes passed, he watched her manage multiple tables simultaneously, taking orders, delivering plates, refilling drinks, all while maintaining a calm, professional demeanor. Vin noticed the small gestures she made to keep customers comfortable. A gentle smile here, a quick adjustment of a chair there, a soft word of encouragement to a nervous child. Each action, small as it was, spoke volumes about her character and her commitment. Vin's admiration grew. He realized that empathy wasn't just about noticing tears. It was also about recognizing dedication, resilience, and humanity in everyday actions. The evening progressed, and Vin observed how the staff worked together. There was teamwork, subtle support, and mutual understanding among the servers. Occasionally, one of them would give a quick nod to another, signaling that they had a table covered or a tray taken care of. It was an unspoken language of cooperation and solidarity, and Vin felt a sense of pride, knowing that his restaurant had cultivated this environment. But his focus remained on the young server. He wanted to understand her experience fully, to see the person behind the uniform and the professional mask she wore for everyone else. Vin's attention was drawn to a small mishap. A glass tipped over at a nearby table. Without hesitation, she moved to clean it up, her hands steady despite the earlier tears. The customer barely noticed the incident, thanks to her quick response, and continued with their conversation. Vin admired the way she handled the situation with grace, seamlessly integrating care and efficiency. It was a small demonstration of her strength and ability to continue, despite the weight she carried. He realized that these small moments defined a person's character, often far more than grand gestures. He noticed a moment of exhaustion cross her face, a quick pause as she leaned slightly against the counter for support. Vin understood that exhaustion wasn't always physical. Sometimes it was emotional, mental, the accumulation of stress and responsibility. It was in these small, almost imperceptible moments that true courage revealed itself. He felt a sense of responsibility, a desire to offer support in a way that was thoughtful and discreet. Vin decided to move slightly closer, carefully, without drawing attention. He wanted to be within a range where he could intervene if necessary, but still give her the space to regain composure. He watched her take a deep breath, close her eyes briefly, and then continue moving across the floor. Each action was deliberate, a quiet demonstration of resilience and strength. He felt humbled by the human capacity to endure and persevere even when life became difficult. While observing, he thought about the power of acknowledgement. Sometimes people didn't need solutions to their problems. They needed someone to see them, to recognize the effort and courage it took to continue. He considered leaving a subtle gesture, something that could provide encouragement without drawing attention or making her feel self-conscious. It wasn't just about witnessing a moment. It was about making that moment meaningful, transforming it from a private struggle into a moment of support and recognition. Vin's reflections were interrupted briefly by the sounds of the kitchen. Plates clattered, orders were called out, and servers moved in rhythm with the bustling environment. Despite the noise, he could sense the tension still lingering around the young server. She smiled at a table, laughed softly at a customer's joke, and continued her work with meticulous care. Yet Vin could still detect the faint tremor in her hands, the subtle signs of emotional fatigue. It reinforced for him the complexity of human resilience. People could function, perform, and smile even when they were barely holding themselves together inside. As he watched, Vin felt a growing sense of admiration and respect. This was the reality of work, of life outside the spotlight, where ordinary people faced extraordinary pressures without recognition. He thought about the times he had been shielded from such realities by fame, and he felt grateful for this opportunity to see the world from a different perspective. It was a humbling experience, a reminder that heroism existed not only on screen but in everyday acts of courage, empathy, and perseverance. Vin began to formulate a plan in his mind. He wanted to make a difference, even if it was a small one. He considered how to approach the situation without startling her or drawing attention. He wanted his gesture to be thoughtful, discreet, and meaningful. It was clear to him that a simple act of kindness could transform this moment for her, providing reassurance, encouragement, and recognition for her resilience. And he knew he had the means and the presence to do so without disrupting the flow of the restaurant. The young server continued her work, moving from table to table, delivering food, refilling drinks, and ensuring that every customer felt cared for. Vin watched her with a quiet sense of admiration. Each smile she offered, each polite word she spoke was an effort, a testament to her professionalism and inner strength. He realized that people like her formed the backbone of not just the restaurant, but of society itself, quietly maintaining order, providing service, and showing kindness even when life was heavy on their shoulders. Vin finally made a decision. He would wait for a moment when she could step away briefly, without feeling pressured or embarrassed. He wanted to provide a gesture of encouragement, something that would help her feel seen, appreciated, and supported. He understood that it wasn't about grandeur or public recognition. It was about human connection, empathy, and the impact of small, thoughtful actions. This was the essence of kindness, and he was determined to make it count. As the evening continued, Vin remained at his table, quietly observing the restaurant and the people within it. He felt a connection to everyone working so hard, especially the young server who had allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. He realized that in these ordinary places, in these small moments, real-life stories unfolded, and each one mattered. And he knew that when the time came, his next steps could leave a lasting impression on someone whose efforts and struggles deserved recognition and support. Vin Diesel stayed quietly at his table, watching the young server as she moved through the restaurant with grace despite the exhaustion that lingered in her movements. He noticed the way she paused for a brief moment at each table, listening carefully to the customers, making small jokes to lighten the mood, and adjusting little details that made each experience special. He could see the effort it took her to maintain composure, to smile genuinely while hiding the weight she carried inside. For Vin, this was more than just a restaurant shift. It was a display of human strength and perseverance. He thought about the times in his own life when he had been exhausted, when challenges felt overwhelming, and yet he had to perform in front of millions of people. He understood the courage it took to keep moving forward when everything inside you is trembling. Watching her now, he felt a deep connection to her struggle. It reminded him that courage wasn't always loud or celebrated. Sometimes it was quiet, subtle and seen only by those who were paying attention. Vin noticed her hands shaking slightly as she carried a tray filled with dishes to a table on the other side of the room. Her steps were careful, precise, and deliberate, and she managed to serve everything without spilling a drop. He admired the focus and determination she displayed. It was clear that she cared deeply about doing a good job, about making each customer feel valued, even though she herself was carrying an invisible weight. He realized that this kind of dedication was rare and beautiful. As he watched, he thought about the importance of listening. Sometimes people didn't need advice or solutions. They just needed someone to be present, to witness their experience without judgment. Vin felt that he wanted to offer that kind of presence. He wanted to show empathy in a way that was subtle yet impactful, a gesture that would reassure her that she was seen, that her effort and strength were recognized and appreciated. It was a delicate balance, but he felt confident he could navigate it with care. The young server moved back toward the kitchen, briefly leaning against the counter to catch her breath. Vin noticed the faint tremor in her hands and the way her shoulders sagged for just a moment before she squared them and returned to the floor. He understood that this pause was a small but significant act of self-care, a way to gather strength and continue performing her duties. It reminded him that even in the busiest, most demanding moments, people found ways to support themselves, even quietly, in ways that others might never notice. Vin considered how best to approach her. He wanted to acknowledge her struggle without embarrassing her or making her feel singled out. He thought about leaving a note, a kind word, or a small gesture that could provide encouragement without drawing attention. He realized that sometimes the most meaningful actions were the ones that went unnoticed by everyone, except the person receiving them. He wanted to make sure that she felt supported, valued, and appreciated without disrupting the flow of the restaurant or her sense of professionalism. As he observed, he noticed the interactions between the staff. There was a rhythm to their work, a flow that kept the restaurant running smoothly. Servers exchanged quick nods. The kitchen called out orders in a coordinated manner, and the manager moved quietly behind the scenes to ensure that everything stayed on track. Vin appreciated the teamwork and coordination, but he remained focused on the young server. He wanted to understand her experience, to see the person behind the uniform, to recognize the effort and dedication that made her a vital part of this environment. A small incident drew his attention. A customer accidentally dropped a utensil, and the server quickly moved to retrieve it, apologizing politely for the minor disruption even though it wasn't her fault. Vin admired the grace with which she handled it, the way she maintained composure while still showing empathy and attentiveness. He realized that her actions reflected a deep sense of responsibility and care, qualities that were rare and remarkable in any workplace. It reminded him that heroism could be found in the ordinary moments, in the quiet acts of dedication and kindness that often went unnoticed. Vin noticed that she occasionally stole brief moments to herself, a quick glance toward the back or a deep breath to steady her nerves. He understood that these small pauses were essential for maintaining balance, for keeping herself together in the midst of a demanding environment. He respected her awareness and self-discipline, recognizing that it took courage to admit, even briefly, that she needed a moment to gather herself before returning to the tasks at hand. As he continued observing, he realized that the young server's experience reflected the broader challenges that many people faced every day. Life demanded strength, perseverance, and resilience, and often the struggles went unseen. Vin felt grateful for the opportunity to witness this moment firsthand, to understand the human side of work and responsibility, and to consider how he could offer meaningful support. He knew that empathy was powerful, and that small gestures of recognition could make a profound difference in someone's day. Vin noticed a pattern in her movements. Despite the exhaustion and emotional weight she carried, she remained consistent in her attention to detail, her care for the customers, and her commitment to doing her job well. Each step she took, each smile she offered was an act of courage. He felt inspired by her resilience and strength, realizing that these qualities were often underappreciated and overlooked. It made him think about how important it was to acknowledge and honor the efforts of those around us, even in small ways. He also noticed the subtle ways she interacted with her colleagues. A quick nod here, a whispered word of encouragement there, a momentary glance that conveyed understanding and support. Vin recognized the importance of these interactions, the invisible network of support that kept the staff functioning effectively under pressure. He felt a sense of admiration for the way they worked together, for the camaraderie and unspoken solidarity that allowed them to navigate challenges while still maintaining professionalism and care. As the evening continued, Vin realized that he wanted to be more than a silent observer. He wanted to provide tangible support, a gesture that would acknowledge her efforts and offer encouragement. But he needed to be thoughtful, ensuring that his presence remained discreet and respectful. He considered the best way to do this, weighing the options carefully. He wanted to create a moment of reassurance and connection, something that would leave her feeling seen and valued without causing discomfort or embarrassment. Vin's thoughts drifted to the broader meaning of kindness. He understood that small actions often had the greatest impact, that a word of encouragement, a gesture of support, or a simple acknowledgement could transform someone's day. He felt a deep sense of responsibility to act, to offer this kind of support to someone who had shown such dedication and courage. He knew that tonight, his presence in the restaurant was more than just a casual visit. It was an opportunity to make a meaningful difference in someone's life. He observed the young server as she moved through the restaurant, noting the small ways she managed her workload with efficiency and grace. Each table she served, each interaction she had with a customer, was a demonstration of her professionalism and inner strength. Vin felt a growing admiration for her resilience, recognizing that thin qualities were often invisible to the casual observer. He realized that his gesture of support could serve as a reminder to her that her efforts were appreciated, that her dedication mattered, and that she was not alone in her struggles. Vin also reflected on the power of empathy and leadership. He understood that being a leader wasn't just about managing operations or making decisions. It was about recognizing and supporting the people who contributed to the success of the organization. He thought about how a small act of kindness or recognition could boost morale, build trust, and foster a sense of belonging. He felt inspired to embody these values in his own actions, to offer support in a way that was meaningful, thoughtful, and respectful. As he continued to watch, he noticed a brief moment of vulnerability from the young server. She paused near a table, her shoulders slumping slightly before straightening herself and moving on. Vin recognized the courage it took to continue despite the emotional weight she carried. He felt a deep sense of empathy and a desire to offer support, to create a moment of reassurance that would help her feel seen and valued. He knew that this gesture, small as it might be, could have a lasting impact on her day and her sense of self-worth. Vin made a quiet decision. He would find a way to reach out to her, to acknowledge her efforts and offer encouragement without disrupting the flow of the restaurant or drawing attention. He wanted his gesture to be discreet, thoughtful, and meaningful, a reflection of the respect and admiration he felt for her resilience and dedication. He understood that even small acts of kindness could create ripples of positivity, transforming moments of struggle into moments of connection and support. As the evening progressed, Vin remained at his table, observing the young server and the rhythm of the restaurant. He felt a deep sense of connection to the human stories unfolding around him, to the challenges and triumphs of the people who made the restaurant run smoothly. He realized that life was filled with these quiet, powerful moments that often went unnoticed but carried profound significance, and he knew that by offering a thoughtful gesture of support, he could become a part of this story in a meaningful way, leaving a lasting impact on someone who had shown courage, resilience, and dedication in the face of difficulty. Vin Diesel had watched the young server for most of the evening, observing her quiet determination, her strength, and the subtle ways she carried the weight of the day. As he continued to see her move gracefully through the busy restaurant, his thoughts shifted to how he could make a meaningful impact on her night. He wanted to act, but he needed to be careful, discreet, and thoughtful. He didn't want to embarrass her or make her feel singled out. He needed his gesture to be one of encouragement, recognition, and support. He watched her approach a table of regular customers, her hands steady despite the exhaustion that lingered in her movements. She smiled warmly, engaging with them in a way that made them feel welcomed and valued. Vin admired the composure she maintained, even though he knew from earlier observation that she had been struggling moments before. There was a quiet bravery in her actions, and he felt a growing sense of respect and empathy for her. Vin began to think about the ways in which he could show kindness without disrupting the flow of the restaurant. He knew that words could be powerful, but they had to be delivered in a way that was subtle and personal. A direct conversation might startle her or make her feel self-conscious. He wanted something that would reach her heart without drawing attention from others. He considered leaving a note, a kind message, or a small gesture that could offer reassurance and encouragement. As he observed her continue to work, Vin noticed how other staff members interacted with her. There were quick nods, brief words of encouragement, and unspoken gestures of support. He realized that even in the midst of a busy evening, the staff had a network of subtle encouragements that helped them navigate the challenges of the night. He admired this teamwork, but he remained focused on the young server, recognizing that she had moments when she needed personal encouragement beyond the general support of her colleagues. Vin saw her pause near the kitchen, taking a deep breath and straightening her posture before returning to the main floor. It was a brief moment, almost invisible to others, but he recognized it as an important act of self-care and resilience. He felt inspired by her ability to find strength in such small moments, to continue performing her duties despite the emotional weight she carried. He wanted to honor that resilience in a thoughtful way. He finally made a decision. When she returned to her station for a short break, he would leave a note with a kind message, a gesture that would acknowledge her efforts and provide encouragement. He wanted the note to be simple, sincere, and personal, something that would make her feel seen and valued. It wasn't about grandeur or public recognition. It was about offering support and kindness in a meaningful way. Vin waited patiently, observing her as she moved between tables, delivering plates, and attending to customers. He noticed the small details she paid attention to, adjusting a chair for comfort, refilling a glass without being asked, offering a reassuring smile to a customer who seemed uncertain. Each of these actions demonstrated care, attention, and dedication. He wanted to ensure that she felt recognized for these efforts, even in a small way. As she finally stepped away for a brief break, Vin discreetly reached for a piece of paper and wrote a note. He chose his words carefully, wanting to convey empathy, encouragement, and appreciation without making it overwhelming. The note read something like this: "You are doing an amazing job. Your strength, dedication, and care make a difference. Take pride in the work you do and remember that someone notices and appreciates your efforts." He signed it simply, leaving it anonymous, wanting the focus to remain on her, not on him. He placed the note carefully on her station where she would see it when she returned from her break. Vin stepped back slightly, observing from a distance to ensure that it remained private yet would be found naturally. He wanted her to feel the encouragement without feeling exposed or embarrassed. It was a subtle, thoughtful gesture, one that reflected his respect for her resilience and dedication. Moments later, the young server returned to her station. As she glanced down at the note, Vin could see the subtle change in her expression. Her eyes widened slightly, and a small surprised smile appeared on her face. She read the message carefully, pausing for a moment as she absorbed the words. Vin watched quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment knowing that his small gesture had made a difference in her evening. She took a deep breath and straightened her posture, a renewed sense of energy visible in her movements. The small act of encouragement seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders, allowing her to continue her work with a lighter heart. Vin felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that this moment of recognition had provided reassurance and support without disrupting her professional demeanor or the flow of the restaurant. As the evening progressed, Vin observed her interactions with customers and colleagues. She moved with a renewed sense of purpose, her smile more genuine, her energy more vibrant. It was clear that the note had touched her, providing a boost of confidence and morale that carried through her remaining tasks. Vin felt a deep sense of connection, recognizing the power of empathy, kindness, and subtle gestures in making a meaningful difference in someone's life. He also reflected on the broader implications of this experience. In his own life, he had often been the recipient of small acts of kindness that had left lasting impressions. He understood the importance of paying it forward, of recognizing and supporting those around him in meaningful ways. This evening had provided a perfect opportunity to act, to offer encouragement and recognition to someone who had demonstrated quiet strength and dedication. Vin continued to watch as the young server completed her shift, moving from table to table with grace and professionalism. He noted the subtle ways she maintained her composure, the small gestures of care and attention that made a difference to the customers. He felt a profound respect for her resilience, understanding that her actions reflected not only professional dedication, but also personal courage in the face of emotional challenges. The night began to wind down, and the restaurant's energy shifted as fewer customers remained. Vin reflected on the events of the evening, feeling a sense of gratitude for the opportunity to witness and support the young server. He realized that the small act of leaving a note had created a ripple effect, transforming a moment of struggle into a moment of encouragement, recognition, and human connection. He watched as she completed her final tasks, tidying up her station and preparing to leave for the night. Her steps were lighter, her posture more confident, and her smile genuine. Vin felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that his gesture had made a difference in her evening, providing encouragement and recognition in a thoughtful, discreet way. As he left the restaurant quietly, Vin reflected on the importance of empathy and kindness in everyday life. He understood that small actions could have profound impacts, that noticing and supporting others could transform moments of struggle into moments of connection and encouragement. This evening had reminded him that true heroism often existed in subtle, quiet acts of care and recognition, and he felt grateful for the opportunity to participate in such a moment. Vin walked away with a renewed sense of purpose. Carrying the memory of the young server and the quiet impact of his gesture, he understood that life was filled with these ordinary yet extraordinary moments. Moments that often went unnoticed but held profound significance. And he knew that by acting with empathy, thoughtfulness, and discretion, he had contributed to a meaningful human connection, leaving a positive mark on someone's life that evening. Vin Diesel left the restaurant quietly, walking out into the cool evening air, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected when he decided to visit. The lights from the street reflected on the pavement, and the distant hum of traffic mixed with the occasional laughter of people passing by. He took a deep breath, reflecting on the night and the quiet human story he had witnessed inside. It was a story of resilience, courage, and the subtle power of kindness. A story that reminded him that even small gestures could leave lasting impacts. Inside the restaurant, the young server continued her shift, but there was a noticeable change in her demeanor. The note she had found earlier seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders. Her steps were steadier, her smile brighter, and her energy more consistent. She interacted with customers with a warmth that felt effortless, as if the encouragement had reminded her that her efforts mattered. Vin knew from a distance that even a small acknowledgement could transform someone's evening, giving them renewed strength to face challenges and continue with dedication. He thought about the broader implications of what he had witnessed. Life often placed people in situations where their struggles went unnoticed, where their strength and resilience were invisible to those around them. Yet in those same moments, even a quiet act of recognition or support could make a profound difference. He had seen it firsthand tonight and understood that such